At some point you'll notice that the doctors around you start changing. One colleague starts coming to lunch, another starts talking a little less than they used to. The consultant who used to love teaching suddenly just wants to finish the ward round and go home. Someone who was always full of energy now seems like they're permanently running on empty. And what's strange is after a while you stop noticing it yourself. It just becomes part of the culture. It becomes normality. You tell yourself that's just what medicine does to people. That's where the mistakes begin. I've been thinking about that a lot recently because I don't actually think medicine changes people. I think burnout changes doctors. The problem is that burnout doesn't usually arrive with some dramatic moment where you suddenly realize something is wrong. In my experience and after working with doctors over the last few years, it usually starts much earlier. It starts while you're still functioning, you're still seeing patients, you're still doing a good job, and you're still showing up every day. But your brain and your body have already started sending you signals that something needs to change. Looking back, I ignored this in myself. I ignored every one of those signals. So today I want to walk you through the 5 biggest signs I wish someone had pointed out to me years earlier. Because if you catch burnout early, as a doctor, recovery is infinitely easier than waiting until it forces you to stop. The first sign I ignored was that patients slowly stop feeling like people. And that sounds horrible to say out loud, but I think it's important to be honest. I wasn't becoming a bad doctor. I still cared. I still wanted the best for every patient, but somewhere along the way, patients started feeling more like problems to solve, numbers to fix, than people to care for. You stop remembering names, you remember room numbers, and you kind of convince yourself that's the way to be efficient, to operate when it's busy. But the problem happens when you fully remove your emotions from the real people. You stop thinking about their stories, you start thinking about the next task. Psychologists call this depersonalization, and it's one of those 3 core features of burnout. Your brain is trying to protect itself by creating emotional distance from the very work that once gave you purpose. If you've noticed yourself becoming more cynical, more sarcastic, or emotionally detached from patients, don't ignore it. That's not your personality changing. It's usually your nervous system protecting itself after carrying too much emotional load for too long. The second sign was a kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. We've all had long weeks, we've all had nights on call where we're physically tired, and that's normal. This felt completely different. I'd had a weekend off, sleep was pretty decent, I was doing very little, but Monday morning came about and I still felt empty, demotivated, and that's because burnout isn't simply about being sleep deprived. It's about your brain and body running out of the resources they need to keep adapting to new stressful situations. And when stress becomes chronic, your emotional and physical energy begins falling together. That's why you can feel tired before you've even started the day. If rest isn't making you feel restored anymore, don't just assume you need another coffee, more caffeine. Ask yourself why your system isn't recovering in the first place. The third sign was probably the most confusing. On paper, everything looked fine. I was progressing in my career. I was doing a decent job. People trusted me. But internally, I constantly felt like I wasn't doing enough. I'd second-guessed decisions I'd made dozens of times before. Simple tasks took more effort, and concentrating became harder. I felt less effective despite working just as hard. This is another classic feature of burnout that most people rarely talk about. It's called reduced personal accomplishment. Your performance might not have changed very much at all, but your perception of your performance has. Chronic stress changes the way your brain evaluates itself. You stop noticing what you're doing well and become hyper-focused, hyper-critical on everything you're not doing. That's why so many excellent doctors quietly convince themselves they are failing, they're struggling. And the fourth sign was losing the reason I became a doctor in the first place. Nobody wakes up one morning and suddenly loses their sense of purpose. It fades slowly, insidiously over time. And you stop feeling proud after helping someone. You stop feeling curious. The work starts feeling heavier. The days start blending together. And eventually medicine becomes something you're just surviving in instead of something you once genuinely loved. This one scares me because it's so easy to normalize. You tell yourself you're just in a busy season, but if you've lost all sense of meaning in the work that used to energize you, it's worth paying attention to that, because purpose isn't some luxury. It's one of the biggest protective factors we have as doctors against burnout. That feeling of satisfaction, that feeling of fulfillment, of helping people, doing a good job, doing something that's meaningful to society. And it often can get us through the hard times, the stresses of being a doctor, the uncertainty, etc. The fifth sign wasn't psychological, it was physical, and honestly my body noticed this long before I did myself. My sleep became inconsistent, I relied more on caffeine than I should have, training became harder to recover from, even just going to the gym, going for a run, and I found myself reaching for quick fixes instead of the real recovery. So like more caffeine, more ways to distract myself, more dopamine hits. The unhealthy habit itself isn't the real issue, it's what it's trying to compensate for or distract yourself from. Your body will almost always whisper something before it starts shouting, so the signals will show up before you maybe notice it. So if you've recognized yourself in any of those 5 signs or signals, what should you actually do? The first thing I'd say is don't panic. Recognizing burnout early is actually a very good thing. The doctors I worry about most aren't the ones who notice these signs. They're the ones who've become so used to feeling this way that they think it's normal, they think it's part of the job, and they start to just accept it. The second thing I do is ask one question: where is my energy leaking from? Is it physical? Have you neglected your sleep, movement, recovery? Is it mental? Are you constantly reacting and never thinking? Is it emotional? And have you been carrying difficult experiences without ever processing them? Is it social? Have you slowly isolated yourself from the people who recharge you? Are you actually sharing your worries, your concerns with other people? Or are you keeping it to yourself? Have you simply lost sight of why you started medicine in the first place? Are you losing your purpose? Your meaning? Once you've identified where the leak is, don't make the mistake I made and try to fix everything all at once. Burnout rarely happens because one thing went wrong. It usually happens because 10 small things slowly drift in the wrong direction. The same is true for recovery. Pick the area that stood out to you most while watching this video. If it's physical exhaustion, spend the next couple of weeks protecting your sleep, your nutrition, and your training schedule like they're non-negotiable appointments. If it's emotional exhaustion, stop convincing yourself you'll process everything when things calm down. Talk to someone you trust, whether it's a colleague, a friend, a family member. Journal your thoughts, get it out on a paper, and find a way to unload some of what you've been carrying. If you've lost your sense of purpose, ask yourself a simple question: when was the last time medicine genuinely felt meaningful? Sit with it. Sometimes that question tells you more than you expect. And if you've realized you've slowly lost yourself outside of work, make it a priority this week to do one thing that has absolutely nothing to do with your sense of being a doctor, your identity. Something you'd still enjoy even if medicine disappeared completely tomorrow. None of those things will solve burnout instantly overnight, but they will tell your brain and your body that something is changing. And that's where recovery starts. Now, obviously, this is exactly what we work through inside my program, but not just to overcome burnout, but to actually upgrade yourself as a doctor, as a high performer, to look after yourself, your longevity, your health, and your fitness. So others have gradually lost their identity outside of medicine. And the goal when working with one-to-one is to identify your personal bottleneck, the thing that if we move, if we improve, is going to be the biggest return of investment in terms of your performance, your health, your energy. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it is burnout is much easier to reverse when you catch it early. So don't ignore those whispers, because those whispers are often your mind and your body trying to protect you long before they reach the point where they have no choice but to force you to stop. If you'd like further help, you know where to go. You can book a diagnosis call from me in the description to get your recovery process started and to upgrade yourself. I'll see you in the next one. Upgrade yourself? That's... yeah. Anyway, see you in the next one.